When you're confused about who you are, they call it an identity crisis. In these situations, exploration is important, but what's even more crucial is building something called identity capital. If you listen to today's story to the end, you'll understand why prolonged exploration can be dangerous and what you need to live a life that moves forward. There's a professor at the University of Virginia named Meg Jay. She's a clinical psychologist who studies adult development and is often called a psychologist for youth, because she specializes in the problems of people in their 20s. Two 20-somethings came to Meg Jay for counseling, Kate and Elaine. First, Kate came because of issues with her father, but that wasn't the real problem. In Meg Jay's view, Kate was lost in a fantasy about her 20s. While she had some interest in fundraising, she would say things like, "These days, 30 is the new 20, right?" and hope to experience a free and limitless 20s. During her counseling sessions, she would often talk about her weekend parties or the guys she had recently dated. On the other hand, the second client, Elaine, came for counseling because she felt she was having an identity crisis. She had gone to medical school but, having always been interested in photography, she switched her major to art. After graduating, she worked as a freelance photographer, but her income was unstable, so she quit. After that, she worked as a babysitter, then took a break to learn yoga, and repeated this cycle of working and resting, waiting for a flash of insight to strike. In her session, she said she was planning to work part-time at a cafe for a while to figure out what to do with her life. In other words, you could say Kate's 20s were too free, and Elaine's were filled with nothing but exploration. What do you think? Does any of this resonate with you? That's right. The exploration you do in your 20s is free, fun, and new. It feels like entering a space with an endless number of rooms to explore. In your early 20s, committing to one thing can even feel strange. You wouldn't meet someone for the first time and say, "We're going to get married," right? But at a certain point, this freedom and novelty begin to transform into pain. Kate saw her friends with clear careers and life purposes and felt like she was the only one being left behind. Elaine felt that her friends, who once envied her free life, now pitted her. What makes this situation even more problematic is social media, a collection of only the best moments, which pressures us to live the perfect life. And what happens then? We find ourselves in a situation where we can't choose anything because we're too busy trying to find the perfect option among countless choices. Have you ever endlessly scrolled through a food delivery app trying to pick the perfect meal? I've been on trains that take about an hour and a half, and I've often spent tens of minutes just trying to decide what movie to watch, only to give up and listen to music instead. If it's this hard to choose what to eat or what movie to watch, imagine how much harder it is to decide on a career path. Of course, you might want to extend this period of freedom, but you need to know what this freedom is for. This freedom is for deciding for yourself what kind of person you will become. There's a saying, "Hope is a good breakfast, but it is a bad supper." The longer the exploration goes on, the less joy it will bring. If you have an hour for lunch but spend 30 minutes choosing from the menu, you won't get to eat. So, what should you do? You need to move from the pleasure of newness to the pleasure of depth. You must stop exploring identity and start building identity capital. Identity capital is an investment in yourself. It's about doing something well or for a long time until it becomes a part of who you are. For me to say to my friends, "I think living as myself is important," is different from saying, "That's why I run a brand called Self." And regardless of how I appear to my friends, it's only by taking direct action that I can grow. This is what it means to build identity capital. It's about making what you pursue an actual part of yourself. To build identity capital, you must act. Even after hearing this, it might be hard to let go of the desire to make the perfect choice. You worry that your choice might be wrong. If so, let's compare someone who only explores with someone who moves forward, even if imperfectly. Imagine a person here. They set a goal. They move towards it. But then, what they pursue changes or the world changes. So the goal changes. Then the path must change too, right? Changing paths happens more often than you think. Now, what's the difference between this person who fumbles their way forward and someone who waits for a perfect dream or a flash of insight? When you build identity capital, it allows you to move on to building other identity capital. You have to start moving forward to see what paths are available, which then allows you to adjust your course. It's only after you take direct action that you can truly know what you want. I'm in my early 30s. Do you think I planned to create self from my early 20s and executed everything perfectly? Absolutely not. I first graduated from a 2-year college with a degree in electrical engineering. I also explored intensely until my early to mid-20s. With 2 years of college, 1 year of leave, and 2 years of military service, I explored for almost 5 years. As a result of my exploration, I decided I wanted to realize sensory beauty through engineering creation. Simply put, I wanted to make beautiful electronic devices. It was a goal unrelated to self. So, I got a job as an R&D engineer developing electronic circuits. It was incredibly demanding, both physically and mentally, but it was fun because I was growing as a developer. After about 2.5 years, the research lab was shut down due to company circumstances, and I had to find a new job. This time, I worked as an equipment operator. The work there was a terrible fit for me. You had to be quick with your hands, and I'm slow. In that kind of work environment, skill matters more than personality, so my relationships with colleagues weren't great either. On top of that, I wanted to start my own one-person business. But working in the electronics field, I realized that starting a business with electronic products was beyond my capacity. The risks related to performance, quality, mass production, and certification seemed far too large. In this situation, I also fell into a career crisis. I thought hard about what I truly liked. Looking at the books I loved, I found a common theme: extracting insights from various sources. So, this time I wanted to become a data scientist. After some research, I found that starting as a back-end developer was a good path, so I began studying programming. But as I was studying programming, I realized I could build a single web page, a single product. At that moment, it hit me: I can deliver the values I want to share with the world through a product. So I thought about what values I wanted to share. After much reflection, I realized I had always been serious about living as myself. And that's how Self was born. I started a YouTube channel to see if my past experiences and struggles could be helpful to others. If I had tried to have a perfect dream from the very beginning, would I have ever been able to start anything? I haven't lived an incredibly intense life, but I've always tried to do my best in each moment. I tried things I wanted to do, things that didn't suit me, and read books I loved. All these things gathered and connected, one by one, to create Self. I never knew my life would turn out this way, and I don't know where it will head from here. What did Steve Jobs call this? Connecting the dots. It means the connection of points. Steve Jobs dropped out of college and audited a calligraphy class he was interested in. 10 years later, this became the foundation for creating the fonts on the Macintosh. It's only when you look back that you can see how the dots connect. I didn't know how my efforts would connect to Self, and Steve Jobs didn't know his calligraphy class would connect to the Macintosh's fonts. So, what should you do? Trying to make the right choice is, of course, important. But making the choice you made the right one is far more important. I'll say it again. Strive to make the choice you've made the right one. If you've listened this far, you must be serious about Self. In a recent video, I said something like, don't live a life swept away by the currents of society. In your 20s, don't party just because others are, get a job just because others are, or get married just because others are. But in this video, it might seem like I'm saying the opposite, right? When researchers looked at how people solve identity crises, they found that a life of only work without exploration is indeed rigid and formulaic. But on the flip side, Erik Erikson, the psychologist who coined the term identity crisis, advised that we shouldn't waste our time in a state of confusion caused by too much freedom. So, what's the solution? It means that after spending some time exploring, you have to bravely dive into something. In other words, your exploration should be conducted intensely, with a deadline. And when that deadline comes, you must bravely dive in based on what you've explored. I call the former the self-exploration phase, and the latter the self-commitment phase. As Meg Jay, the youth psychologist from the beginning of the video said, there is no time in life that is too late to create the life you want. Indeed, Kate ended up getting a job in nonprofit fundraising, and Elaine joined an animation company and later started working in the film industry. Now, it's your turn. It's not too late. If you feel you need to explore, set a deadline and do it with intensity. After that, you must dive in bravely. A good plan actively executed now is better than a perfect plan next week. The joy of newness and freedom is good, but I hope you will now move toward the true newness and freedom that comes from depth. Self will be with you. Today's message is truly important, isn't it? Today, you learned why prolonged exploration is dangerous and the importance of commitment. Exploration in your 20s is free, fun, and new. But at a certain point, this freedom and newness turn into pain. Hope is a good breakfast, but it is a bad supper. The longer you explore, the less joy it brings. If you have an hour for lunch but spend 30 minutes deciding on the menu, you won't get to eat. Of course, you might want to extend this period of freedom, but you need to know that this freedom is for deciding for yourself what kind of person you will become. That's why, at some point, you must stop exploring your identity and start building identity capital. It's about doing something well or for a long time to make what you pursue an actual part of yourself. To build identity capital, you must act. When you build identity capital, it enables you to move on to building other identity capital. You have to start moving forward to see what paths are available, which then allows you to adjust your course. It's only after taking direct action that you can know what you want. It's only when you look back that you can see how the dots connect. So, what should you do? Trying to make the right choice is important, but making the choice you've made the right one is far more important. Conduct your exploration intensely with a deadline, and then, based on that, you must bravely dive into something. I plan to return with more content like today's to help you find your light, so if today's story was helpful, please press the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you.